Hi everyone, and welcome to Politics by Numbers with Electoral Calculus. I'm Bryony Richter, Communications Director, and I'm joined today by Martin Baxter, founder of Electoral Calculus, and Chris Hopkins, Director at Savanta. So today we'll be discussing MRP modelling, a technique that many know from election predictions, but is increasingly being used in commercial contexts to help businesses understand their clients better and potential new audiences. So, to start us off, Martin, for listeners that maybe don't know the term MRP as well as we do, can you give a wee explainer about it, please?
Sure. So MRP is a newish statistical mathematical technique which lets us get the results of polls for individual areas within the country. So it's often used on the political side to predict constituencies, but you can use it on the non-political side to get public opinion in various areas like seats or districts.
Fantastic. Thank you for breaking us down. And obviously something that is well used at Savanta, and now we're going to be looking at the other business end of it. So Chris, how does using MRP in commercial and consumer research differ in practice from election predictions, and where does it add the most value for clients?
Yeah, I guess in practice it doesn't differ that much. I mean, essentially, as Martin kind of explained, you are distilling public opinion into small geographies, whether that's electoral constituency or district or any other sort of smaller geographic area. And essentially, when we're doing it from voting intention, you're asking a voting intention question, and when you're doing it for other commercial practices, you're asking just a different question, whether that's an attitude or an opinion or trying to predict behaviour, I guess, ultimately. It doesn't differ hugely in the sort of practical sense. I think what the sort of challenge can be sometimes from the commercial point of view is getting clients to think beyond the voting intention and to see how they can apply it to their research objectives, particularly when they do want some really high level and really intricate geographic data, but just assume that MRP only is applicable to voting intention.
And can that be quite a tricky conversation to have with clients at the beginning? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, I mean, I think again there are kind of two challenges. One is perhaps for our less statistically or able or numerate clients. Often you are introducing quite a opaque concept to them that can be quite difficult for them to get their heads around. And I think often what we've done with Martin and with electoral calculus quite a lot is to sort of demonstrate it and then look at past examples and how it can really benefit them. I think then from the other point of view, often they come in with a bit of an idea, but the questionnaire doesn't always fit necessarily what an MRP would do. And I think that there is, again, perhaps a little bit of a misunderstanding sometimes, taking what feels like a straightforward concept, taking a national opinion poll and distilling it into local geographies. But sometimes, clients want some odd things, I guess historically, distilled into those local areas, particularly if it's sort of past behaviours that can be a little bit more difficult. And I think, we always encourage them to stick with attitudes, opinions, and necessarily experiences, which can be far more difficult to measure and ultimately use a regression model on.
Yeah, of course. And Martin, anything to add? Because obviously we do a lot of that with clients, and the questions of what they want and what we want them to have.
Yeah, Chris made a great point there that opinions work better than experiences. If you ask people, did it rain yesterday? MRP is not really going to be a great guide to that, because the way it works is it looks at correlations between how people are answering the questions and their demographics or the demographics of people in their neighbourhood. It does, if you ask people what's their favourite flavour of ice cream, as long as that correlates with other things, then MRP will give you interesting results. Even if it doesn't correlate, you'll still get the right answer, which is that it doesn't depend very much, and there's the same proportion of vanilla and chocolate fans across the country. But clients get the most interesting results if there is a correlation.
Yeah. And, coming back to you, Chris, on MRP there with your clients, what problems does it solve exactly that maybe classic polling analysis doesn't? Is it the variety? Is it the flexibility there is?
Yeah, I think, again, it is often just those clients that want that high level or low level, I guess, geographic insight. And that can really differ, I think, across clients. And I think when we're talking about non-political clients, I guess what we're really talking about is non-voting intention clients. Whereas I think a lot of ours will still operate within the political sphere, but often it is perhaps to get some materials together to lobby specific MPs that are in particular seats. Maybe even it's a nationwide campaign where they want to have statistics for for each MP and write to them. I guess that is again from a lobbying point of view. But other sort of really more commercial or consumer applications of MRP. Some of the things that I think we've quoted or tried to work with clients before is where to locate a new branch of shop perhaps or gym or something else similar in that realm. Looking at where their target audience ultimately lives, which is something that the MRP can do really well, and then obviously looking at where other competitors might be using that geographic overlay, and that's something where MRP has some huge benefit, I think. But also, again, you do have to get some of that opinion level data in there. But I think MRP, really does have some real practical applications for brands, particularly those on the high street or in that kind of space.
Brilliant. Anything to add there, Martin?
Yeah. So as Chris said, that you don't need to do the MRP, what we call the allocation stage, onto electoral boundaries, although we often do like constituencies or wards or districts, but you can go on to other things like cities is quite interesting for some customers. How various cities compare against each other, postal districts, any geography that you can actually describe, we can do the MRP onto. There's a large amount of flexibility there, and it works for any client who's really interested either in the geographical physical location of things, or as Chris said, lobbying councillors or members of parliament to show them what people in their district think.
Fantastic. And obviously Savanta and electoral calculus have worked many times together. Are there any examples of clients that you could both maybe share a little bit on, of where this has been highlighted, an opportunity that an MRP has highlighted for them, and how they used it and what that process looked like?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of particularly when it's come down to sort of the more of the lobbying side, I think a lot of our clients have ended up being private, so there's probably limited stuff that I can go into. But yeah, I guess in and of itself that is, albeit not a specific client example, but it is a great example whereby a client has been able to use a pretty wide-ranging questionnaire to be able to generate loads and loads of statistics and tell MPs, which is definitely way more powerful than a national poll. What do your constituents think about X, Y, Z, and use that as a really powerful lobbying tool. And I know from a real kind of like practical nuts and bolts level, that has then been really easily these stats have been really easily mail merged into letters that can just go out really quickly, and it just saves the public affairs teams in these companies so much time. And again, it is, I guess, a bit of a financial outlay. We need a certain level of sample size to be able to run an MRP, but I do really think that there is value there, especially when the alternative often would be doing lots and lots of constituency polling, which obviously is incredibly expensive. Yeah, I think even from Savanta's own point of view, obviously we've done voting intention MRPs with electoral calculus and in partnership with the Telegraph before, but we've asked other questions in there. I think Martin mentioned ice cream earlier. I think perhaps that more perhaps food stuff with more regional differences perhaps might be some a bit more interesting. Perhaps what people's favourite sort of condiment for fish and chips, I think, would be a really interesting geographical one. What I'd call a bread roll, I think that's always probably quite interesting geographically. I think we've done some of that stuff before. Whether it ever saw the light of day, I can't remember, but I know that we've definitely put that into the field with electoral calculus before.
Yeah, I've been impressed by the spread actually of organisations that are interested in doing it now. It's sort of grown from MRP started a few years ago, but now we see not just political lobbyists, but mainstream corporates asking corporate questions, charities, some bits of government, quangos. Lots of people for different reasons find it interesting. And that's really encouraging to see this kind of bit of mathematics blossoming.
Exactly, brilliant. And you touched very quickly, Chris, on obviously the financial aspect of it. So if you have, say, a client or a campaign that has a little bit more of a limited resource to them, how do you navigate that? What kind of key pieces of data? And obviously it depends on what they are asking and what their topic is. But where would you start when their budget's a bit tighter?
Yeah, I mean, I think what is great with working with electoral calculus and with Martin is that ultimately we don't need a super large sample size to be able to do this. Ultimately that can be a barrier, and I think that often it is about really presenting the value add and the value for money that can be gained from increasing a standard opinion poll sample size from 2,000 up to about 6,000, which I think we often run with Martin, and then obviously adding some programming and statistical time into there. But really the value goes from having one opinion poll that isn't all that powerful to having 632 individual geographic data points. And I think that when providing our clients do need that many, but even if they don't, even if they're looking at a specific set of constituencies, whether that was by marginality or just Conservative MPs or just Reform target seats or something like that, or even thinking outside of constituencies, certain local authorities just in the northwest, but still want that local authority level data. I think that ultimately the alternatives to get that properly is far more expensive than our MRP. So it is really more about convincing the client and taking the client on the journey that there is so much value in this, and ultimately for a little bit more outlay you get so much more data, and I think that's really the key point.
Yeah, and as Martin was saying, there is a lot more companies now using it, so the awareness seems to be increasing. It's just making sure they know the value versus what they could get elsewhere. So last question I have before I let you guys go is, looking ahead, we've got an incredibly busy year, very exciting one across the political landscape. What's the next big thing that Savanta's looking at? What are you excited? What trends, developments, technology coming up?
Yeah, I mean, at Savanta, it's probably not so much MRP, I guess, but a lot of the stuff that we're really looking at is how we can use synthetic and virtual data, I guess, within our offer to clients, particularly along the sort of more segmentation route. I know that segmentation is used a lot with MRP, particularly when you're looking at what is the proportion of certain segments within a local geography, and I do wonder if there would be some virtual persona / MRP overlay at some point that could be really interesting. But yeah, I think that's definitely where Savanta's heading, more from the consumer aspect than the sort of public affairs and public sector work. But yeah, absolutely trying, and ultimately, again, similar to MRP, it is about bringing to market and a sort of more affordable option, I think, for clients that maybe can't conduct their own segmentation and then do loads of qualitative research among those segments. I think if you can conduct that in a more of a virtual or synthetic setting that's still underpinned ultimately by real data, I think that can be quite powerful and a really affordable option for our clients.
Well, I'm glad you think that's hot, Chris, because we're working on something in the political segmentation space ourselves. So watch this space, podcast viewers. We'll have more on that later.
Yes, stay tuned. Well, thank you so much, everybody. That's a wrap on today's episode of Politics by Numbers. I want to extend my thank you to both of you, Martin and Chris, for joining us today. And we hope you enjoyed the discussion and catch us on the next one. Cheers.
Bye-bye.